Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, and we're back. Brad, welcome back to the studio for our second Friday Roundup.
Hey, Jonathan, very excited to be here. This should be a fun conversation, as always.
Millionaire Educator came in the studio earlier this week, and that episode just rocked.
Yeah, man, it was so inspiring. I definitely listened to that one a couple of times. It's really quite a story. Like he said, he had basically a lost decade from his early 20s to early 30s where he had negative net worth. And that's really remarkable. And now he is the millionaire educator. And you don't have to do everything right. I mean, I think that's one thing we really want to get across to the audience here is you didn't have to have this figured out at 18 and have done everything right along the way. You can screw up for 10, 15 years and just start today. You know, I think that to me was the biggest lesson from that episode. And you're going to be amazed at what kind of progress you can make in fairly short order.
I love that there is this supercharged tool that can just send your retirement plan into overdrive, and it's only available for the select group of teachers, firefighters, state employees, people that have just given so much back to us, and specifically in the cases of teachers, to our kids. You know, my wife's a teacher. I know that job, she easily puts in, 60 hours a week, and sometimes it can feel like there's very little thanks for that. And I love how awesome this financial planning tool is. And I hope that this gave you some ideas on how you can just take that and just use it to absolutely supercharge your retirement.
Yeah. And, honestly, I had no idea about these two retirement tools that they had, the 403B and the 457. I mean, had you ever heard of that, Jonathan?
I had heard about him a while back, but I didn't understand the scope at the time, how it could be applied to so many different groups, and exactly how powerful it actually was. It's one thing to read it when it's on paper, but what we try to do, and I think our audience is responding to this, me and you are committed to making it a story and making it something that you can relate to, and just bringing some of these articles that sometimes on paper can feel a little bit dry and just turning them into actionable content that you can do something with. And Millionaire Educator, by the way, is just an amazing, co-host or guest. And he does that. He turns it into a story.
Yeah, agreed. And I've had the good fortune of meeting Ed a couple times in person. He's just a really nice, normal, approachable guy. And, that comes through. I think it came through in the conversation. And again, just going back to the different retirement options. I mean, being a public employee, we always hear how difficult it is for them and to get wealthy on the salaries and whatnot. But he turned that on its head. He said, we essentially can double our tax deferred savings by having the 403B and the 457. And it doesn't sound like he's depriving himself at all, right? I mean, it just sounded like they have it all figured out. I mean, as far as I see it, it's can you keep your expenses under control and live that frugal lifestyle? And if you can, then, you can essentially pay almost $0 in tax because of all these options you have to defer your income. I think he said, what was his W-2? It was like $2 of salary or something crazy like that. And that's unheard of. But because he's able to take advantage of the 457 is essentially a savings account for all intents and purposes, since there's no penalty for early withdrawal. So you should dump all your money in there. And then if you need it at some point to spend, well, then you can. And then obviously it's a taxable event at that point. But you control it, though. That's the crucial point is, he's keeping his tax down to almost zero. And he controls everything. If he can keep his expenses under control, and I think, what did he say, Jonathan? It was somewhere, and I should have this memorized, but I don't, is to pay $0 in tax. I think he had somewhere in the low to mid 30s So he could have $30,000 of taxable income. And then with the personal exemption and the standard deduction and maybe a child tax credit, that brings his tax down to zero. And then I think he actually wound up paying like what, $850 or somewhere in that vicinity for extra $8,000 of tax. So I mean, he was able to pull out over $40,000 a year and pay $800 and change in federal tax. I mean, that's just ludicrous.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm taking a look at this episode and I'm trying to think, what's the takeaway from this? Can it be simplified even further? What's the one piece that I'm coming away with that I'm incorporating in my own life? And I think what I saw from his scenario is the reason that he is able to massively take advantage of these tax-deferred vehicles is that he keeps his core expenses, his structural expenses, very, very low. And hear me out on this. What I mean is, if you have the capacity to keep your structural expenses, rent, food, utilities, etc., down below 30 or 40K, you are making the choice to keep your expenses inside very low marginal tax brackets. For example, married filing jointly, one child. In the United States, your first $30,000 to $40,000 is going to end up being taxed at a either 0% marginal federal tax bracket or at a 10% federal tax bracket. And if what you need to live and live comfortably can be nestled right around those numbers, you're getting dollar for dollar use out of them. However, if you need $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 just to maintain your lifestyle, to handle your core expenses because a very expensive mortgage, multiple car payments, exorbitant grocery budget, etc., then everything's more expensive. You have to make more money so that you can afford the taxes on it, so that whatever you bring home, you can then apply to these expenses that you've set up for your life, these structural expenses. And I think our audience understands, like, you can play offense and defense. You can make more and you can spend less. You're not limited to just one, but man, you're going to want to start with defense because it gives you so much flexibility with how you take advantage of these tax vehicles like the 403B and the 457.
Yeah, totally agree. And when I'm sitting there listening, even having been in this world for years now, when you say $30,000, it's funny because my reflexive response to that is, wow, that sounds like a low number. And that's me. So I know people are hearing that out there, but what Jonathan said is really crucial. It's keeping those structural expenses as low as possible. The car payment, the student loans, the credit card debt, those kind of things, hopefully your mortgage if possible. Once you get that stuff under control, it's pretty hard to spend more than $30,000 or $40,000 a year. It really legitimately is. I mean, we live what I believe to be a nice, luxurious, upper middle class lifestyle. And I mean, if we got rid of our mortgage payment and, we don't have car payments, we don't have student loans, we would be very hard pressed to spend more than $30,000 in a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, we don't know what we'd spend it on. So, I mean, to me, the argument is always, obviously you could spend as much money as comes in, right? Like Jonathan, you're, as you always say, a reluctant frugalist. You could find a way to spend $100,000 if you were so inclined, right?
No problem.
It's just about reframing this, right? It's just living that middle-class lifestyle just a little bit smarter. And that's the key. So we all know we could spend the money, but if you can just be a little bit smarter, then you can take control of your life back. And I know I say this almost every podcast, but it really needs to be reiterated all the time. This is about control. This is not about deprivation or sacrifice, as Liz from Frugalwoods mentioned. It's not that at all. It's just being a little bit smarter and getting that control of your life back. So if that means quote unquote depriving yourself a little bit, well, the upside of that is so much better. I mean, it's just such a short-sighted way of looking at it that, oh, I'm depriving myself by saving money. Whereas I look at it and say, no, I'm going to take back decades of my life just by being a little bit smarter. That is so empowering. Life is about how you frame it. When you frame something as this is empowering and it's literally getting decades of my life back, isn't that so much better than saying, oh, I'm depriving myself because I'm not getting the golf membership, that Jonathan wants in his wildest dreams, that's just silly season. Whereas you get that control and that is priceless. And yeah, sorry to throw you under the bus there.
No, you're fine. Yeah, that golf membership keeps taking a beating. I'm sorry, guys. I bet you we have a listener out there that works for a golf course, at some level. Maybe he's a golf pro, and he's like, "Gosh, guys, do you really have to keep throwing the golf club under the course here?"
No, we love golf. I like watching golf on TV.
I work on my horizontal game at least twice a year. So going back to the episode, let me emphasize that I'm not trying to force you to live off of $30,000 a year. And I think Brad was hinting at this. What I'm saying is your cost of living, your cost of surviving. If everything were to fall apart and you had to scrunch down and watch every single penny, if that number is less than 30 grand for you to survive. So the cost of your home, the cost to keep the lights on, the cost to pay the food, the recurring bills that you have. If that's less than 30 grand, you have a lot of power. Your discretionary spending, you have a lot of control over that, but it's your big things that you're locked in on and you have to make those payments every single month. That really, I think, sets the tone for where the next 5 years are going to lead your financial future. And that leads me into what I love the way he phrased this. I've never heard anyone else say it. Your side of the ledger. You want to control your side of the ledger. Millionaire Educator is a master at this. He has basically figured out when he earns money, he gets every penny of it. So when he earns $60,000, $60,000 for him goes directly into his bank accounts. And he has ways of using that on an as-needed basis to provide for his family and his life, even if he's not 59 and a half. He's able to draw it ahead of him. He has a strategy for that. On the other hand, in my case, I'm using myself as an example. I have to pay down a significant amount of debt. And so I had to take all that money as I earned it so I could send it off to pay down my student loans. As a result of me having to take that money and claim it as taxable income, I produced a significant tax bill last year of $26,000. That's how much I had to pay the federal government last year. Now,
that's a big dollar figure.
Yeah. And that's what, I'm not saying it's wasted money. I'm super happy that there's no potholes in the road in my neighborhood, but it's gone, right? It's not helping me out. It's not helping me out at all. So Millionaire Educator, his net worth is probably 10 times what mine is right now, easily. And you would think that his tax bill would be roughly 10 times mine. But in fact, he paid $190 last year in tax. I paid $26,000. So does that mean I'm just stupid? Am I doing things wrong? Well, maybe. Okay, sure. But that's also the stage of life that I'm in. So because of the choices I made, because I had that student loan debt, and because I decided I'm going to pay them down early, because I want to be more like him, I first have to pay off those student loans. And you have to pay off student loans with after-tax dollars. Now, if you can get past that and you don't have those student loans, now I'm in this second phase where I can be more like Millionaire Educator and I can start controlling the ledger and I can send all that money into pre-tax buckets. So I'm going to use it one day, but I will be able to control the tax rate. And that's the power of what he's describing. And so when you have debt and recurring expenses, you lose control of that. And I think that's why Brad and I make this case. Get rid of all those things. Get rid of those recurring expenses that aren't worth it. Get rid of the debt. That way you can start controlling what side of the ledger your paycheck goes on.
Yeah, and I guess my follow-up question to you would be, you said someday you can do that. Well, you're going to pay off as I understand it, you're going to pay off your student loans, in the next month or two. I mean, have you put plans into place? 2017 could be shaping up to be a pretty decent right, tax year for you. If you're going to have your first kid, so you're going to have another personal exemption, you're going to have a child tax credit. Are you at the point where you can max out the $18,000 in your 401k? Does your wife have access to 403bs and 457s? Like, is this stuff we're all about transparency here and radical honesty. Do you mind me asking you this? Like, are you guys doing that in 2017, or is that potentially in future years?
I love the question. I'm going to crush my tax bill this year. Yeah, I'm going to max out my 401k this year for sure. I'm going to have my wife max out her 403b. She works at a private school, so doesn't have access to the 457. But if you work for a public school or you're a firefighter, police officer, state employee, you probably do. So make sure you look into that. But for those of you that don't have access to 457s, you do probably have access to other vehicles. And Brad and I kind of have a plan for how we're going to unpack this for you over the next year. But one of the biggest opportunities for a tax shelter is to start a business. And I have some really cool ideas that I'm going to try to use to basically keep that money on my side of the ledger. And I'm excited to do some of this with Brad and be able to talk about it with you on the show.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to seeing what your tax bill is this time next year.
I'm going to make a
cool.
personal commitment. I'm cutting it in half, and I promise it'll be legal and it will be something that you can replicate. How about that?
Nice. Sounds like a plan. And yeah, I mean, that's talk about the cost of debt, right? You probably don't even factor that into your debt repayment for the 168,000 in loans. But there's a straight upfront federal tax cost, if you want to look at it in a kind of a weird way. But your tax liability, you're saying, is you're going to cut it in half. So I mean, that's $13,000 you had to pay this year in federal taxes that you might have been able to do away with some of this planning, keeping the money on your side of the ledger. But you couldn't because you had to pay off these loans. And obviously you've had to do that for the last 3 or 4 years. So that's another cost to debt, like you mentioned. And obviously you're one of tens of millions of people with debt. So this is not about you, obviously, but it's a larger societal thing where we lose control when we have debt. It's just that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I were smarter, I would figure out how to run a math equation to figure out how to incorporate that in. It just feels slightly too complicated for my brain to figure out, but you're absolutely right. When you think about taxes you have to pay because you're servicing debt, there is a definite cost there, and it's an invisible cost that it's hard to measure.
Yeah, agreed. Totally.
So Brad and I have a lot of ideas, and I'm probably overly optimistic that we'll never run out of them, but with what we're actually doing, I really think that will be impossible. We've actually set up a brand new email account, feedback@choosify.com, and we want your help. Is there a topic that you want us to cover, a guest that you want us to cover, some feedback, some criticism, some corrections for something that we've talked about in the past that you want us to readdress? Is there some nuance that you feel like we missed? We're asking you to join us and help us foster this conversation so we can really capture a very comprehensive look at how people from all walks of life can achieve financial independence. If you want to join with us, contribute to the show, help us figure out which conversations we still need to have, please take me up on this offer. Send us an email to feedback@choosify.com, feedback@choosify.com. I also wanted to follow up on something that we talked about last week. We actually bundled together the resources, the actionable takeaways, the big ideas from each show, and we share them with you in the form of a weekly newsletter. And if you would like to, instead of having to take all the notes, just get this newsletter in your inbox each week, there's 2 easy ways to do that. One, this is kind of cool. This is actually from your cell phone. You can text ChooseFI, one word, to 44222. Text ChooseFI to 44222. Or if you're listening to this from your computer or you have access to a web browser, you can at any point in time just go to choosify.com/start. choosify.com/start. We've also set up just a quick handbook called Financial Independence Made Simple, and we're giving that to you as a free digital download. It's actually a multi-page infographic that will really help you dive deep into the big content that we've started to build out and help you get started on your own path to financial independence. So go to choosify.com/start to access that today. And actually, Brad, that's perfect. Speaking of feedback, we actually got a follow-up question about the show. Brad, do you want to go ahead and read that question?
Yeah, as Jonathan alluded to, the cool thing about how we're framing this is we want your input. Just plain and simple. And that means whether on what we're doing or we're hopefully going to have a new guest on every Monday's episode. Okay, so you listen to that episode and you have a question for the Millionaire Educator or Liz from Frugal Woods or the Mad Scientist, shoot us an email at feedback@choosify.com and we can follow up with them and ask them and maybe record a 5-minute segment or, read their email response back. But this gives you an opportunity to really ask these people questions. So like we said, we want this to be the center of the financial independence community online. And we're really doing everything we can to make that happen. So along those lines, Brian had a comment on the Millionaire Educator article here. And he said, great stuff here, guys. Really appreciate all your hard work so far. I have a question about the, quote, separation of service mentioned in this podcast. My wife will be quitting her current teaching job in Florida to stay at home and raise our first child. She has been contributing to her 403B. How would we best go about moving her account to a Vanguard IRA? All right, so my response to this is that one thing we're always going to be here is completely honest. And when we don't know an answer, we're going to tell you guys. But, I'm going to give you my best advice and where to get the information. So I'm not a teacher. I've never worked in the public sector. So I don't specifically know about the separation of service. But what I do know is what the steps that I would take. I would call up Vanguard. I've had phenomenal experiences with their customer service. Even if you don't have an account, just call them up, say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. What are the steps that I need to take? What documents do I need to fill out? What do I need to provide? And they literally hold your hand through the entire thing. So that would be my first step. Another logical option would be to go to the HR department of the school. I'm not sure the timing of your wife, quitting, and if that's public knowledge yet, or if that's something that you want to, keep quiet for now. So that may or may not be plausible, honestly. But those would be the two most logical places. I would say that we will definitely follow up with Ed Mills. I'll shoot him an email today, and hopefully I'll actually either respond on that episode. So that's choosefi.com/013. That'll be at the bottom there in the comments. I'll just reply to Brian's comment. Or if we get a good enough answer from Ed, we'll mention it on our next week's Friday Roundup. So, Jonathan, do you have any thoughts on this question in particular?
Well, my only thought would be if I knew that my wife were quitting in a few months, I would absolutely throw every single extra dollar that I could into that 403B. Knowing that you're going to be able to all roll it over into Vanguard in a few months, I would absolutely max that sucker out if I could.
That's a cool strategy. I like that little kind of pivot on the question. That's a really good response. So yeah, Brian, we'll get you an answer. But yeah, those are our general thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Nice. All right, Brad, we had another question, and this was a question/comment from Jason. And Jason said, I had a question about Vanguard versus Schwab. And he said, love your guys' show. I'm new to the FI world, and I'm looking to change my current investments. I have read so much about Vanguard VTSAX. Just wondering what you think about investing in that compared to Schwab's SWTSX now that Schwab has lowered their fees. I'd love to hear your guys' take on this. Thanks. Brad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a great question from Jason, and we definitely focus on Vanguard. There's no question about that. Pretty much, most people in the FI community do, and I think there are a couple reasons. First, John Bogle is the father of the index fund. He founded the Vanguard S&P 500 fund, I think 40 plus years ago at this point, and he's looked at really as an idol in this community for what he's done for millions of investors. And, Vanguard, they have a really great setup where they're essentially a not-for-profit company, more or less. They're owned by the investors. So their interests align with our interests. So I think those have been the two reasons that I've been biased towards Vanguard. And frankly, their fees have always been the lowest. So you throw that in, which really is the most important thing. And that led us to Vanguard, to be kind of silly about it. But Jason brings up a really good question, which is Schwab. I didn't realize this, honestly. They just lowered their fees. And if you go to just the front page of Schwab.com, it says, think Vanguard has the lowest costs? Think again. See how Schwab index funds compare. And they're saying now that their S&P 500 and their total stock market index fund have an expense ratio of 0.03%, which is just unheard of. That's the lowest I've ever seen. I mean, I think even when you're talking about like the institutional funds that Vanguard has, like for, huge pension funds that have, millions and millions of dollars, I think the lowest I've ever seen is 0.03. So this is really remarkable. I mean, this is the best fee that I've ever seen. So the short answer is, if you're just going straight math, it seems like Schwab is the answer right now, unless there's some compelling reason that what you see is not what you get, which I find hard to believe. It seems like this is the answer. That said, Schwab can always raise their expense ratios, just like Vanguard can, I suppose, but Schwab is a for-profit company. I don't anticipate that happening. So I think the very, very short answer to the question is Schwab, Fidelity, and Vanguard are all wonderful, wonderful companies. It seems like they're in a race to the bottom here on fees, which will only help us as investors. So don't think that if you're invested with Schwab or Fidelity, we think you're doing something wrong. That's clearly not the case. So, it's pretty hard to go wrong with any of these three. And right now it looks like Schwab is the winner.
That's awesome. I do have this affection for Vanguard, probably because of everything you mentioned, because they were the leaders in this space. Schwab would never do this if Vanguard had not made this play for the last 20 years. This is, you still got to go back and give Vanguard the credit for it all. But yeah, I mean, fees are fees. And so it sounds like Schwab is winning right now.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, so you know that Brad and I are super passionate about travel rewards. For those of you that have listened to our episode 009, that is an in-depth explanation of why we get so excited about it. We do not only talk about travel rewards, obviously. We have that as an evergreen content. That is our pillar post on travel rewards. If you know nothing about travel rewards, you go listen to episode 9 and you're going to come away knowing way more than anybody else in your neighborhood about travel rewards. But obviously, you can't hit every single question in a 40-minute podcast. And so what we want to do for those of you, our loyal listeners who are listening every Friday, we want to give you a little something extra. And so once a week, we're going to take a question from the audience on travel rewards, and we're going to try to answer that for you on this particular part of the show. Now, those of you that have zero interest in travel rewards, maybe you should still go listen to episode 9 just to see whether or not maybe there's a place for it in your world, and at least to see why we get excited about it. But, we're just going to do one question. So the rest of the Friday segment won't be dedicated to that, but we're going to do one a week. And so this is our question for the week. And Brad, you ready for this?
I am ready.
All right, Brad. So this question is from Kristen. And Kristen says, "Hi, Jonathan. I applied for the Chase Sapphire via your site, but was rejected because of a lack of recent consumer finance company account information." That's quote unquote. "I'm assuming that's because I have been anti-credit card for so long, over 7 years, that they don't want to approve me. Do you have any advice?"
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I'm going to bet that she heard our Dave Ramsey episode, which is 005. And, there are a lot of people out there listening who are anti-credit card. And, that obviously makes sense from a perspective, right? For people who are in debt and trying to get out of it. But as Kristen ran into, sometimes, the negative repercussions for being anti-credit card are going to hit you down the road and you couldn't have foreseen them. So this is an instance where it sounds like she is, everything put together financially, but evidently she has no credit history, and Chase was not interested in giving her this premium credit card, what I assume to be the Chase Sapphire Preferred, because she didn't have enough of a credit history. So I think for her, unfortunately, this will be not something we can fix overnight, but there are steps to take. And I think the first thing to do is to get a credit card and to establish some length of credit history to show repayment on a month after month basis. And this can be done really simply. So you're not going to get approved for these ultra premium cards, but there are a lot of cards by Capital One and Discover specifically that they'll approve you for credit cards even if you have no credit history. So, you can just do a simple Google search for just that, credit cards for people with no credit history. Capital One or Discover, Discover ID, and Capital One Quicksilver. Get one of these cards. In all likelihood, she's going to be approved, and just use the card religiously for 6 months, 6 to 12 months, even if you only use it for $100 or $200 a month. And obviously you're paying it off on time and in full every single month. That's our big thing, is we always need to stress. If you're going to do this, you have to pay it off on time and in full. So you're establishing some credit history. So the banks can look at you and say, you're not a blank slate anymore. We at least have some knowledge that you're going to pay us back, and you have the ability to pay us back and those kind of things. So that would be my first step. I would look for a card where they say, fair credit needed, instead of, a Chase Sapphire Preferred says you need excellent credit or premier credit, whatever the terminology is. I guess in a worst case scenario, there are things called secured credit cards, which these are kind of a bizarre thing that frankly I've never delved into. So, maybe someone can correct me out there in the audience if I get the details wrong. But as I understand it, you open one of these and let's say it's $500 limit, but it's a secured card. So as I understand it, you have to put up $500 in cash and basically send it to them. So it's more or less a debit card, but you're establishing that credit history. So there's very little risk for the credit card company since it's literally secured by the money that you've already sent them. So that is kind of like a hybrid approach to just using your debit card, but still establishing some credit history. So I think that is something to consider as well.
Brad, there's 5 different factors that they look at when determining what sort of risk you are, where you stand and how they determine your score. And I know they look at payment history. They look at the length of credit history. They look at how many new accounts you have. They look at your hard inquiries, and then they look at utilization. As we've discussed previously, most of those actually work in your favor when you go through the travel rewards program the way that we talk about. But in her case, it was just the length of credit history. There's no active history. And so if she gets that part taken care of, she shouldn't have any issue going into next year if she wants to give this a shot. And if you're hearing this, you're intrigued by it, go back, listen to episode 9. But also, I would just tell you, we actually set up a free travel course for people in our community. It actually walks you through the basics and keeps you up to date on the latest and greatest in terms of redemptions, etc. It'll really teach you the nuance here and help you figure out how to put together a travel package that allow you to go anywhere. To access this completely free course, just go to choosefi.com/travel and check that out. I think it'll be a valuable use of your time. choosefi.com/travel.
And, another just little addendum to this would be, don't give up on the Chase Sapphire card. I think you can likely call the Chase reconsideration line, and you can just Google Chase reconsideration phone number and just give them a call and have a conversation and say, look, we have 780 credit score. Our income is X. We have assets to pay for this. What can we do to get approved?
Yeah.
That might be an instance where it's worth a 5 to 10 minute phone call just to give it a whirl. There's no downside to making the phone call other than your time. So these banks are looking for customers, and they're looking for good customers. So I think it's not inconceivable that they're going to get this card if they make that phone call.
Yeah, absolutely. When you just do the application online, you're just a number. You either call the reconsideration line or you go into the Chase branch. You're putting a personality behind it and a person and other facts, and you're giving them more information. So, all right, thanks for answering that, Brad.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, so guys, we also want to do a case study. And this one was a really cool one, and it was from Tyler. And I'm just going to read the email to you. Tyler says, hey, guys, I'm going to apologize for the length of this email. No need to apologize, Tyler. This is what we do. But I promise the content's not just interesting and unique, but it's also accessible to anyone with a 4-year degree. He says, I love your show. I devour podcasts. I particularly love those in the world of financial independence. And he said he added us to his subscription list. So thanks, Tyler. He said he was listening to the latest episode where we talked about the Friday roundup, and he heard about the call to listeners. And so he thought he would share his experience. So he went to university because that's what society told him he was supposed to do. He says, I didn't really have much of a purpose in doing so. So I majored in French because, I loved it and it was easy. Needless to say, once graduation came around, I had $52,000 in debt, and I knew the only options to me were to become a teacher or a translator. Neither of those were very attractive to me. So what did I do with my French degree? I went to China to teach English with my fiance, now my wife, to see the world, learn a new language, and destroy student debt. Love it, Tyler. We started out making about $1,500 a month each with a free 2-bedroom apartment while only working 9 hours a week. The amazing thing was that we were only spending $100 per week, and that was going out to eat once or twice a day. Then we started doing tutoring on the side, with each of us working 10 to 20 hours and making between $25 to $45 an hour. By March of the next year, we were able to pay off $27,000 of student debt, as well as do 4 weeks of travel across China. We also picked up intermediate fluency in Mandarin Chinese later that year. Lucky for us, one of our tutoring contacts liked us and wanted us to work as English lecturers at the university her husband worked for. This gave us a new, more modern, and also free apartment while doubling our salaries to $30,000 a year for only working 16 hours a week. Although we suffered a little lifestyle inflation, we still managed to pay off the rest of the student loans by March after doing a 4-week trip across 4 countries in Europe. I was also able to achieve lower advanced fluency in Mandarin. Despite a super high savings rate, 94% and 85% respectively, the problem for me over these 2 years was that while my wife knew she wanted to be a teacher and was loving her work, I was not. However, the extra money and free time allowed me to explore my interest and got me interested in international development. Lucky for me, there was a United Nations organization opening up near our university that I started volunteering at, and that eventually led to my getting a position. This was amazing because the field of development is notorious for the 1 to 3 year unspoken requirement of unpaid work/volunteering. So I got the job at the same pay as my position teaching, and I did another 8 months of work in a field that I enjoy. The excess of both time and money gave me the power to explore myself and find a job that allowed me to pay $20,000 cash for my master's degree that I'm finishing up now. I was able to take that time and experience and nest egg to move to an area of development that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I'm starting this Monday. I've now been in the States for a couple weeks and often advocate for teaching abroad to my friends suffering from student loan payments. I think this experience could be really, really valuable to your listeners, particularly those with degrees in humanities, though obviously other fields as well, that are struggling to find their way under the burden of student debt. I can also relate to Brad, as I am a big believer in the power of travel rewards. I'm currently waiting on my second Capital One Business Spark card. I'm also 8 pounds into my goal of losing 30 by August. So that's me, a 25-year-old from the Midwest, now back in a different part of the Midwest, reaching out to some cool dudes on the East Coast. Hey, Tyler, thanks for the shout out. Hope you enjoyed the readout. That's pretty cool, isn't it, Brad?
Yeah, that is quite a story Tyler has. And yeah, I mean, that kind of ties into the whole thought of, he's obviously not at financial independence, but he's been given these options, right? Like he got that development job that he would not have had because he had that freedom and he had these life experiences. I mean, it's just such a neat story. And if I can just kind of pivot real quick to my family, is actually my brother is doing international teaching as well. It's kind of supercharged him on a path to financial independence that he just simply would not have been able to have afforded here in the US. He is teaching in South America, in Santiago, Chile, and it's just this wonderful opportunity. And not only is his salary significantly more than what it was here in Virginia teaching math, he's at one of the best schools in South America. They pay for, similar to Tyler, they pay for his living expenses. The tax rate is virtually zero or somewhere 10% or under. I mean, it's just this incredible, incredible opportunity. And, more than that, it's this life adventure that you would not get just doing the normal 9 to 5 here in the US. And obviously most of us, this is our life. So, I'm not denigrating, everything what we've chosen, but man, how cool would that be to have that adventure where Tyler's traveling across China and across Asia, and my brother can travel across South America whenever he wants because they have the flexibility. They have a built-in support system of people like them. I know in my brother's case, around him, there are all these American expats are living down there and they want to explore. And I mean, it's just such a cool environment to be in. So I would definitely recommend that as something for people to look into for sure.
And actually, if you think about it, we spent the majority of the episode with Millionaire Educator talking about 457 and your side of the ledger. But if you remember how he got his start, it was geo-arbitrage as well. So, and actually even a consistent theme throughout his career was geo-arbitrage, although in some cases, he was still inside the States. I think there's really something there. Maybe it's something we'll explore further. I love these stories of people that make unconventional choices and supercharge their path to FI by just doing things a little bit different. And so, Tyler, thanks for sharing that with us. I think our audience will find that useful. I love hearing stories like that. And until you sent it to me, I didn't know that Brad's brother had actually done something similar as well. So that's 3 case studies just all together of people that have made that choice and used it to supercharge their path to FI. And that's not even counting the other tools that we unpacked with the 457 and the 403B and your side of the ledger type stuff. So that's really cool. All right, next we have a wild card segment. And this week we wanted to talk about frugal wins of the week. And I think Brad had one he wanted to share.
Yeah, so we have a cool little frugal win of the week. So this is about our cars. So Laura and I both have 2003 vehicles. Mine's a Honda Civic and Laura's is a Toyota Highlander. And they both passed some neat little milestones mileage-wise. So Laura just passed 100,000 miles on her car, which was really cool. We're numbers geeks, so maybe this is only cool to us, but we enjoyed it. We literally took pictures of our odometers here, and that was a car that we bought used from CarMax here in Richmond. And I mentioned this on an earlier podcast where we literally got it for half price. We got it at 27,000 miles, so it was essentially brand new. but instead of costing 30,000 retail, it costs us about 15. So 15 grand. We're coming up on 10 years of owning it, and it's going strong. So that was cool. And mine passed a funny little milestone, which is 111,111 miles. So 111,111. It was just kind of a neat little thing. So yeah, we both have over 100,000 miles in our cars now, and yeah, I mean those things are hopefully will last forever. At this point, there's we don't really drive all that often, and so we're not putting 20,000 miles a year on them or anything. I think I put under 3,000 miles on my car last year. And that included like one big trip to a conference. So, I mean, these things realistically could last us another 15 years if all goes well.
And that's awesome. If I had the little sound clips with the standing clap, I would insert it for you right here.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And I just have just one little addition to the Frugal Wins of the Week. And this is maybe a different segment we should do, which is kind of like life hacks or new apps that we found. I actually wound up, even though we certainly advise investing in mutual funds and index funds, as we've talked about previously, there are some people out there who just want to either buy individual stocks or diversify in some manner that they're going to buy stocks, right? So most of the time you need to pay a commission every time you make a stock purchase. So what I found was actually two websites and apps that allow you to make commission-free stock purchases. So just a neat little hack, again, if you're someone who wants to invest in individual stocks. So there's an app called Robinhood, and they offer completely free $0 commission trades. And those are all, it's like going to Fidelity and executing a trade. So this is app only, actually. So you can't do it through a website, which is for a dinosaur like me is a little hard to get used to, honestly.
Scary.
But yeah, the site is very legitimate. They've raised tens of millions of dollars of venture capital from some of the biggest names in the business, and the standard governmental insurance applies. So this is the real deal, and you can buy any stock you want on their platform, which is nice. So the other one is a little more limited. So this is a little niche, but it's called Loyal3, the number 3. So loyal3.com. And they also allow you to make commission-free stock purchases, but it's more like a kind of a gimmicky thing where I think they have like 100 or so of like the most famous and popular stocks. So, the Apples, the Googles, Disney, that kind of thing, Amazon. But they also have Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company. So, I'm a huge fan of Buffett, and this is a nice, easy way for me to purchase stock in the company. And I'm actually able to set up a nice automated investment. So I think I set up like $500 a month to buy their stock on the 3rd of every month or thereabouts. So yeah, so every month, regardless, I'm just going to keep adding to my position in Berkshire, and yeah, no commissions, no fees. So anyway, long story short, Robinhood, the app, and loyal3.com.
So I'm sure there's someone listening to this that is thinking right now, but I thought you guys were VTSAX purist. And well, you're not totally wrong, but the way I look at it is kind of like a core and satellite approach. Like the main highway that I'm using to get my family to financial independence is VTSAX, or specifically low-cost broad-based index funds. Like 80% plus of my portfolio is in that concept. Just buy everything, buy them all. But the satellite, what's on the side there, think of that like as a hobby. You're identifying awesome companies that you believe in and from a long-term perspective, and it doesn't make or break you, but it's nice to have some chips on the table. That's kind of like my personal mentality. But the problem, if you get all of these different funds and all of these different accounts all over the place, it gets kind of messy, which goes against my craving for simplicity in my life. And so that's actually where the net worth tracker that we've talked about in the past, personal capital, really comes into place. What if you could bring all of your accounts into one place so you could view it? Just from a viewing perspective, be able to see everything in one place, your retirement accounts, your taxable investment accounts, your savings accounts. And then if you have something set up like Loyal or Robinhood, you can bring all of those in and just see what your portfolio as a whole is doing. And then what if on top of that, that service was completely free? Interpersonal Capital, the ultimate net worth tracker. And they are an affiliate of ours, but what's crazy about it is this service is 100% free to use. There is no downside to using it, and it will absolutely simplify your life. Set one up if you haven't already. Give it a shot. I think you'll really enjoy it. To do that, go to choosefi.com/PC, choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. It's a fantastic tool you can use to simplify your life. And by using our link, you're directly supporting the show.
Yeah, and we have Mr. 1500 coming up this coming Monday, so don't miss that. And yeah, one thing, like we always say, we want you guys to be involved. So if you have suggestions for guests, or if you have some topic that you want us to talk about or guests to have on, just please send us an email. As Jonathan said earlier, it's feedback@choosefi.com. And just shoot us an email and give us a name, give us a topic, and we'll make it happen. So, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So, yeah, we really appreciate it.
And remember, please text ChooseFI to 44222. Text ChooseFI to 44222 to get on our email list today. Limited time only, and that is your weekly spam announcement.
I was going to say, please don't include that. That sounds horrible. But since you put that caveat in,
all right, guys, you all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.